All right, Matt, thank you so much. You know, it's still hard to believe that more than 2,800 people lost their lives 1 year ago today here at the site of the World Trade Center. One of them was a man named Rick Rescorla. He was a Vietnam veteran who many say saved hundreds of lives on September 11th, but shortly after going back into the World Trade Center to rescue others, to double check that no one was still in there, Tower 2 collapsed, and Rick never came out. His remarkable story and that of his best friend Dan Hill, an American Muslim who fought in Afghanistan, is now told in a new book called Heart of a Soldier. It was written by Pulitzer Prize-winning author James Stewart, who spent countless hours with Rick's widow, Susan Rescorla. And Jim Stewart, good morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Good morning, Kate.
Nice to see you both. I know that your husband was head of security for Morgan Stanley, and that was the largest employer at the World Trade Center. He's credited with saving hundreds of lives. I mean, there were many heroes that day, but certainly he should be always on that list. I know that you've dealt with sort of heartache about, on one hand, you celebrate that your husband was a hero. On the other hand, you mourn the fact that he left you alone.
That's correct, yeah.
How do you sort of square those two feelings?
You eventually come to a point in time where I accept, first of all, I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of what he did that day. And he was my hero before 9/11. He was a warrior, he was doing his job, and you know, I know why he went. I know why he went the way he did. And I just was upset in the beginning to think, well, why was I left? But I know what I have a different mission. I have a new mission, and that is to not let people forget not only what happened to Rick, but what happened to America.
In fact, we have a photo of Rick taken last year as he was helping everyone out of the World Trade Center.
Yes.
He called you shortly after that first plane crashed into the building. What did he say?
He said to me, stop crying. He said, I have to get everybody out of the building, and I want you to know if something happens to me that you made my life.
And that was the last time you heard from him.
And then I said, you made my life too, and the phone went dead. And then I kept watching the television, and then the building came down.
Did you know right away?
Yes. I knew when he spoke to me that I would never see him again, just from the way he spoke to me.
Jim, Rick was an amazing human being prior to September 11th. He had such a rich and interesting life, almost something out of a spy novel.
Absolutely. I mean, I really find it an epic story, and his life was entwined with so many great historical events: British colonialism in Africa, the Vietnam War, the protests on American campuses, the financial centers, and he was there in the '93 bombing. He loved the books of Rudyard Kipling and Joseph Conrad. He could have been a character in one of those novels.
I think it's so interesting looking back on your career as a writer. You've written a lot about the lack of integrity in corporate America, the lack of integrity, in your view, in the American political system. This story could not be further from those. I mean, you're talking about a story of honor, integrity, doing the right thing. There are thousands of stories like this, or, you know, thousands of victims who led pretty remarkable lives, maybe not quite as exciting as your husband. Why, I'm curious, did you choose this one?
Well, Katie, I think we all changed because of September 11th, and I felt compelled to write this story. I've never felt anything like it in my life. And yes, it's the opposite of the kind of behavior I wrote about before, the worst in human nature. And here was a story in crystal clarity that showed the greatest and the best and the most noble in human nature in Rick Rescorla, and I had to tell that story.
And at the core, it is a love story, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, he had a full and wonderful life. And largely, I think he would say, because of this great love and romance he found with Susan towards the end of his life, but thank God he found it, because it completed his life and they made each other whole, as Susan has said so many times.
How did you meet?
Actually, we were living in the same townhouse complex, and he was jogging barefoot, and I was walking my dog, and he went by, and I just said, why are you jogging in barefoot? And he said, I'm writing a book about Rhodesia, and I wanted to know how it felt to, you know, to walk with no shoes on.
And you must have thought, gosh, this guy could be pretty interesting.
I thought from the moment, yes.
And of course, this great love of your life came later in your life,
right,
for you, which was a wonderful surprise and enriched your life so much, and his life as well.
Yeah.
This also is a book about friendship. Tell me about this one individual. So fascinating because it really is sort of emblematic of the whole of a different chapter in this tragedy, isn't it, Jim?
Well, Rick met his best friend Dan Hill in the remote corner of Africa in the early 60s with politics and intrigue and war swirling around them. And they forged a friendship that maybe only two soldiers can who have saved each other's lives. I mean, Rick grabbed helicopters and came to Dan's rescue on an isolated hilltop in Vietnam. And yet, I have to say, I envy this friendship. I don't have a friendship like this in my life. It was so close. It was so intense. I think it shows Rick's huge heart, which is partly why it's Heart of a Soldier, not only for the woman that he loved, but this great capacity for friendship, a very deep and inspiring relationship.
And
I think.
this friend of his, Dan Hill,
Yes.
converted to Islam.
Amazingly. I mean, you know, fact stranger
talk
than
about a
fiction.
twist.
He had parachuted into Lebanon in a U.S. operation in 1958, where he first met Muslims. He became interested, and later in life, he did convert to Islam, which enabled him, first of all, he speaks fluent Arabic, and secondly, after the 93 bombing, he went to various mosques in the New York area, and he came back to Rick, and he said, you know, they're not giving up. There is virulent anti-Americanism and hatred in this community. These buildings are going to remain a target, and they started calling the World Trade Center Ground Zero in 1993.
But nobody really listened, did
No
they?
one wanted to hear that. No one. We went into denial. America went into denial. The Port Authority went into denial, and we saw that we reaped the consequences.
Meanwhile, I know that your husband often wrote and thought about writing a book called Heart of a Soldier. And one of the things he jotted down shortly before he died was heroic acts tend to gather around soldiers, perhaps stirred up on the cries for patriotic duty. They're so relevant, those words, aren't they?
Exactly. And it was just so wonderful that I found these notes, you know, that he had written in the months before this all happened. And I knew as soon as I found them that I wanted to write the book that he wanted to write. His job was security, but his passion was words and writing. And so we just looked forward to his retiring so that he could write. And so this, to me, is the greatest gift I could have given him.
Wow, he sounds as if he was an absolutely remarkable man. And Jim, this is a remarkable book. Congratulations on capturing not only love and friendship, but true heroism. It's called Heart of a Soldier. Jim, Stewart, and Susan Rescorla, thank you so much, and all the best to you today.
Thank you so much for having us on the show. Thank you.
And now, back to Matt.